are the first people in the world to hear this. I didn't get to say this last night. We just were talking about other stuff. And it has to do with the fact that I had such a great experience working with Mark. I really sort of loved the collaboration and kind of doing new things in Percy's world.
A lot of the stuff that I wanted to talk about was Rick did an article with Entertainment Weekly, and he talked a lot about like writing and books and like the future of Percy Jackson books, and said a bunch of stuff that I thought was really interesting. The way he put it was like very intriguing. He essentially said like, I am not going to be the one to write books of Percy and Annabeth when they're in college. And he didn't say like no one's going to write those books when they're in college, but he said I'm not going to be the one to do it. And so he said like I'm not sure that I'm the person to write that, when the person asked about more stories about them when they're in school. And he said, I consider myself a middle grade writer, of course, because that's the age I taught, that's the age I know best, and that's kind of the sensibility I have as a person and a writer. When you start getting into the high school years and beyond, I mean, yes, I went to high school, yes, I went to college, but I don't know that I am as effective either teaching that age group or writing about it. And he basically said, like, he doesn't think that he'd do a good job with writing stories of them in college. And he basically just said, like, I don't want to mess it up. That was, like, literally his, like, next line was, I don't want to mess it up. And so he said, I think my sweet spot is middle grade. So even though in the later books they're high schoolers, he still tries to write them for as if they're in middle school. But I just thought it was interesting the way he put that, of like, I'm not going to be the one to write them. And I was like, is someone else going to write them? Because just the way that he put that, I was like, is someone else going to write them? That would be fine.
What can I tell you about that other project? Okay. After season 1 of Percy Jackson came out with Disney Plus, suddenly all the executives were sitting up and saying, oh my God, that did really well. We need more. What else have you got? And I was like, well, I mean, we're already talking about possible games, and there's however many other books in Percy's world. But the thing about the other books is you kind of have to do the first Percy series first, because they're chronological, and it really wouldn't make a lot of sense otherwise. So I said, well, I mean, there are short stories with Percy, and they said, no. What we would love to do is something that we can sort of do, like, they call it interstitial content, which means like between seasons. And we've got all these great sets of Camp Half-Blood that we're not using, but the actors are busy, so maybe not with Percy in it, but is there anything we could do like that? And I said, guys, I've got a million projects going on. I don't want to write another book just to write another book. I know it seems like that's what I do sometimes because I keep writing all these books. But honestly, every book I write is a book I feel really good about, and it's a way for me to kind of come at Percy's world in a different way. And so,
like, everyone knows like your voice by now and has an idea of who these characters are. But I was like, that's interesting to think about, of the idea that like somebody else could write them in those years that is better at writing like YA ish like books for the basic, it would be like YA, like teenage kids instead of middle school kids or whatever for their years in college. Like he said, I really enjoyed, for instance, writing the Nico D'Angelo books with Mark Oshiro. Writing with Mark has helped me to understand Nico in a more authentic way, and it's yielded a book that is more than I could have done by myself. I would love to look at that for other characters and say, who is somebody from this background who really knows what this character might be going through and would put a more authentic spin on what they've been through. And so he was basically saying that he likes the idea of having authors from whatever background the characters are in, like basically doing like co-writing.
Then I got this sort of middle of the night thought, and I talked to Becky about it afterwards, and I was like, we had a really good time with Rick Riordan Presents and bringing in authors from just wide array of cultures and backgrounds and letting them kind of have fun and tell stories like Percy Jackson. And then I took it a step further, and I invited Mark into Percy's world, and we got to sort of explore it together and do a collaboration. And if you've read Son of the Star, it's not exact, it doesn't sound like a Mark book, and it doesn't exactly sound like my books. It's something of a hybrid. So I started thinking, what if we did that in books and television at the same time? And I invited other creatives into Percy's world to create a story with me. So that got me really excited. And
it feels kind of like a natural thing for him because of his imprint.
Yeah.
His Rick Riordan Presents imprint officially came out in like 2018. Because he realized, like, I'm not the one who should be telling these stories, and so instead he gives people a platform to tell stories from their own background, their own culture and things. And so it would be very easy for him to work with some of those people, with some of those characters if they wanted to. That would be really fun.
It's Percy Jackson.